let's get started on the tutorial for the 2-for-1 cell phone pouch. Okay, for me, I went ahead and cut everything already, and I've got all of my items that I'm going to need to complete this pouch. It is intermediate. The reason for that is because it does include zipper instruction, and it is a little bit more complicated, but it's not hard at all, and I encourage any beginner sewer to follow along with this pouch. It's so fun to make. Okay guys, so the first thing I'm going to do is follow my manufacturer's instructions for fusing the fleece to both the wrong sides of my pouch pieces, and it's the main. So you will have the main fabric on this side and you will fuse the fleece to the wrong side, and I've already done that. So now let's go on to the next step. Okay, preparing our pocket piece. Let's go ahead and set aside the two main pieces for now. Let's go ahead and grab our main pocket piece. So pocket piece was cut to the dimensions that it was stated in the pattern. What you're going to do is you're actually going to take the piece and you're going to fold it long ways in half so that both the edges come together, and you're going to iron it, press it so that you get a middle line. That middle line then is going to determine where you place your fusible fleece that you were supposed to cut for the pocket piece. Go ahead and line it up on that center line right here. It should be touching about the top edge of that piece, pocket piece. Go ahead and fuse that in place, and then you're going to fold it up just like this. I give it a little press usually just to give it a nice clean look. And then you are actually going to baste this top part, the top edge, just so it stays in place for now. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll be right back. Okay, I have went ahead and sewed a top base stitch to the top edge of the pocket piece, and as you can see, I did it very close to the edge, so it's about 1/8 inch away. You don't want this to be seen when we're going to move on to step 2, where we prepare and then attach our binding piece. So we're going to go ahead and set this aside for now so we can move on to step 2, which is our binding piece. So what I'm going to do is find that, I believe it's this one, and I have cut this already. And what we're going to do is, following the instructions, we're going to go ahead and fold this in half, and we're going to press it with the wrong sides facing. As you can see, my outer side, my main side, is facing out. That gives us our center line. We're going to take those edges, those long edges, and fold in about 1/4 inch, maybe more, to that center line. Press that in place, and you're going to follow the same for the other side. Then you will take the whole piece that you have pressed and you'll press it in half, and that will give you your binding piece. I'm going to go ahead and do that right now, and then I'll be attaching it to the pocket piece. Okay, so I went ahead and prepared my binding piece, and now it's ready to attach to my pocket piece that I just completed for preparing my pocket in step 1. Okay, I'm going to take this, you can see the edge where we basted it, and I'm actually going to open this binding piece just a little bit, and I'm going to sandwich this right in there. And I usually center it. You will have a little bit hanging off the sides, but that makes it much easier to put in place. So I go ahead and I kind of just fold it over just like that. Pin your binding in place, or clip, as I like to clip mine. I do both. And now you're going to do a top stitch starting at this end, making sure to back stitch all the way across to here, back stitch again. It'll be about 1/8 inch, and you're going to do the same thing for the other edge all the way across, making sure to back stitch. And doing the 2 lines just really gives it more of a professional look. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll be right back with you. Okay, so I went ahead and did my 2 top stitches 1/8 inch away from the edges or the sides, and now my pocket piece is completed for now. So now we are moving to step 3, which is preparing your main pouch piece. So go ahead and take one of your outer main pieces, just trim up some of that, and we will be using, actually, yes. So now, taking your main pouch piece, I lay it long ways. We're going to be taking the prepared pocket piece, and we're going to place it on the bottom edge of the pouch piece. And we're going to It's going to be 2 inches from the top, as you can see. Go and get my ruler so it's easier for you guys to see that. It will be at the 2-inch mark, and it will lay perfectly at the bottom of your pouch piece. And what we're going to do is we're going to pin this in place. I actually do like to use my pins for this part. I find that it keeps it in place much better. Going to pin both the top and the bottom. And I kind of do it a little bit further away from the edge because I'm actually going to be sewing it on the opposite side so I can see my edge. And we're just going to be basting. We're going to be basting down the sides just to keep our pocket piece in place. And what I do is I actually turn it over and I use my line as a guide. Now you're more than welcome to trim this up exactly like so and do your baseline. I don't know why, for some reason I just do that. So I'm going to go ahead and baste my pocket piece on the sides, and then I'll be back with you. Okay, I went ahead and basted both the sides of my pouch piece, and now I'm going to turn it around again, and I'm going to trim it up to match perfectly with my edges. So I'm just going to take my ruler, my rotary, and give it a nice trim, and I will do that for the other side as well. Okay, and now your pocket piece is completed. So let's set that aside for now and move on to step 4. Okay, so now we are going to be moving on to step 4, preparing your strap attachment or attachments. Now, if you're only doing the wristlet, you only need to make one of these. I'm going to be doing the full pattern, which includes the crossbody strap, so I'm going to be making 2. This will mean that both sides of your pouch will have a D-ring. I've got my 2 D-rings. Let's start. I'm going to start with just one. Take your 4x4 with the wrong side facing up. You will press in half. Using that center line, go ahead and press both ends in towards that center line. Now you will fold it completely in half and press. Go ahead and sew a top stitch on both sides using an 1/8 inch. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll be right back with you. Okay, so I went ahead and did my 2 strap attachments. I did both of the top stitches on both ends, and this is what you're left with. 2 pieces look like that. Now you're going to take your D-ring and you're actually going to loop it, and you want it to be where the right side of the stitching. I have a preference. I don't want the back side up. So I loop it where the straight edge is going to be facing your bottom. And then I go ahead and pull it together, and I'm going to close these edges together. That way your D-ring stays inside. I'm going to do that for both pieces, and that will be completing step 4. Okay, now we're going to be moving on to step 5, attaching your D-rings, or one if you're only doing the wristlet. For this, I'm going to be attaching both. So with one of your D-rings, you will be placing it 1 inch. Go ahead and grab your prepared pocket piece. I like to face it long ways. I'm going to mark down 1 inch and about 1 inch in. You are more than welcome to pull it out a bit. My machine, unfortunately, doesn't allow me to get super close, so I pull it in just a little bit more. So I do the 1 by 1 inch, but you're more than welcome to do it even more. Pull it out just a little bit more if you don't want as much of the edge showing. And I'm going to be doing that for the other side as well. I'm going to go 1 inch down and 1 inch in. Let me get my ruler so it's a little easier to see. Measuring the 1 inch by the 1 inch. And that is where I will be placing my other D-ring on the opposite side. And I just go ahead and give it a nice little pin in place, or clip in place. I keep saying pin, clip in place, pin, clip, whatever you want to use. I just don't want it to shift when I'm basting it down. So now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to baste these in place we're just using 1/8 inch. That way they stay in place when we move on to the next step. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now, and then I'll be back with you guys. Okay, I've went ahead and basted my D-rings in place, and as you can see, if I turn this over, this is actually going to be the top of the pouch. This is where we're going to attach our zipper, and you can tell that the D-rings are closer to the top. And that's where you want them to be. All right, moving on, and again, you want to make sure the D-rings are facing on the inside. I know when sewing, sometimes it's tricky to remember those little things, but that's what's going to be popped out when you're completing this pouch. So D-rings on the inside. Okay, moving on to step 6, preparing your phone pouch pocket closure. Okay, I'm going to set this aside for now. All right, your pocket pouch closure is very simple. It's very similar to the other steps with one exception. On one of the edges, we are actually going to be folding this in 1/2 inch in, and I like to kind of measure it just to make sure I get an exact. I'm going to be pressing that down, and that way this is actually going to be the end that will be on the outside of the pouch. But anyways, let's go ahead and press that, and then you're going to fold it in half, and press it, and using that center line, you're then going to fold one end in towards the center line and the other end in towards the center line, and then you will be folding it completely in half. And you will notice that you have one raw edge and one folded in edge, and you will go ahead and do a top stitch 1/8 inch on both sides. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll be right back with you. Okay, so now I've completed my pocket closure. As you can see, I've done both of the top lining or top stitching, and you have one folded edge, which is the clean side, and then you have the raw edge. And this is actually the edge that we will be attaching to our pocket piece, moving on to step 7. Okay, so now I'm going to take my pouch that I've prepared, and I'm going to take the raw edge with the right side up. I have 2 sides because obviously I like my top stitching that looks really neat on the top. And I'm going to be placing it in the center. So what I like to do is I fold my piece just slightly in half, and I kind of pinch the edge, and that gives me my center. And I kind of line it up with the center. One of my lines, it's the center. I take my piece, and I'm going to be basting it right in that center mark. I actually move it up just a teeny bit off the edge, so it gives me a little space. You want about 1/2 inch at the end, because that's where you're going to put your cam snap, and you want enough space for your cam snap to lay directly under the binding piece. So this is how your piece should look when you're placing it on the pocket piece. You'll have your closure. So I'm going to go ahead and baste this right here in place, and then I'll be back with you. Okay, so now I've basted my pocket closure in place, and this is what your piece should look like so far. Now I'm going to set this aside, and we're going to be moving on to step 8, preparing your zipper. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my zipper. I'm just going to use a basic nylon. In my pattern, it states that you need a zipper length. I actually extend that length just a little bit. Most of the zippers I have on hand are slightly longer, but I'm going to be cutting it to size anyways. So it doesn't really matter what size you have, you will be cutting it to size anyways. So first what I'm going to do, I'm going to open my zipper. I'm going to grab one of my zipper ends. You should have 2. I actually take mine with the right sides facing down, wrong side up, and I fold it in half. And I press it. And I'm going to do that for both pieces. And just for video purposes, I'll just press it with my finger for now. Okay, now with the zipper open, I usually take my zipper and I kind of line it up. And I go to the edge where the zipper end is, zipper stop. I take the folded edge and I'm going to line it up just under the zipper stop. And I actually pin mine in place, kind of close to the bottom, just like so. And then I'm actually going to sew a top stitch. I'm going to sew it in place just under the stop. You don't want to catch it on that because it is a metal piece and it can break your needle. So go ahead and go about 1/8 inch under that and just sew it across. I do a couple stitches, that way it really keeps it secure. I'm going to go ahead and do that and then I'll be right back. Okay, as you can see, I went ahead and did a top stitch, or just stitching it in place. And now I'm going to take my pin out. I'm actually going to trim the edge just a little bit. I don't need that much laying over. And then I'm going to take this over to the iron and I'm going to press it away from the zipper. And then I'm going to top stitch on this edge 1/8 inch. And that's going to secure one end of my tab. I'm going to go ahead and do that and I'll be right back. Okay, so now we've completed one end. Now we're going to do the next. With your zipper closed, I went ahead and cut the other end of my zipper to match the 8-inch mark. This just makes it a lot easier for me personally when I'm attaching the other end. So I take the folded end just like you did the last one, and I'm going to place it at that 7-inch mark. And I'm actually placing it about 1/4 an inch above the 7-inch mark because we are going to need to be sewing it in place at that 7-inch mark. So go ahead and just like you did the last one, pin that end in place. I use a pen or water-soluble pen, whatever you want, and I marked that 7-inch. And as you can see, here's the 7-inch, and that's where I marked it. And that's where I'm going to be sewing my line, right down that 7-inch mark. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll be right back with you. Okay, so I went ahead and did the same thing as I did for the other side. I pressed it. I went ahead and did another top stitch. I did trim off some of the zipper too, the zipper end as well. And then I cut it to 1 inch, and now the total length of my zipper is 8 inches. Now, there are a lot of different methods to doing zippers, just for whatever reason happens to be my way that's stuck. But if there's a method that you like to use to get to your 8 inches with your zipper tabs, then please feel free to do that. But this is just how I do it. So now we've completed our zipper. Now we are going to be moving on to step 9, and I'll be right back with you with step 9. Okay, moving on to step 9, attaching zipper to pouch. I'm going to take one of my lining pieces that I previously cut, and facing right side up, I'm going to then take my zipper and I'm going to place it right on top. And if you notice, my zipper pull is at the right side. That's just how I like my zipper pull to open. And when you're doing that, that means that it will be opening on the end with your with all of your attachments, which I feel like gives it a neat look. But if you're maybe a left-hander and you want it to go the other way, you can certainly turn this way. But for pattern purposes, I'm going to go ahead and follow the instructions that I wrote for you guys. So we're going to go ahead and place the zipper right on top of the lining piece, and you will see the zipper pull at the right side. And let's go ahead and take our prepared pocket piece, pouch piece, and we're going to turn it upside down carefully and lay it right on top, matching the ends. And I'm actually going to pin that in place, and then I'm going to sew using my zipper foot. And you want to sew a little down a little further away from the stitch that's already there, the basting stitch, so you don't see that when you then flip it later. But for this step, let's go ahead and get our zipper foot and let's sew along the edge. When you get to the end, you will need to move the zipper pull over to finish the end of this of the right side. Otherwise it'll get kind of stuck in the needle, and that's no fun. So let's go ahead and I'm going to do that. I'm going to do my line with my zipper foot, and then I'll be right back with you guys. Okay, so I went ahead and did my sewing, and now I'm going to open this, and you should have your zipper open. I'm going to go ahead and close it. I'm going to pull both of the fabrics away from the zipper, so it should look like this. And I'm just going to give it a small press. I'm just going to press it down to give it a nice clean finish for both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, I went ahead and pressed both sides away from the zipper, and now it's got a nice clean press look to it. I'm going to take my other lining piece facing right side up, and I'm going to take my piece that I've already completed and lay it right on top, lining it up, just like that. Now I'm going to take my other piece, my other main fabric piece, making sure to keep in mind if you have any fabric that is lined a certain way or you want it to face a certain way, always make sure you put it on top so that the fabric, when you then flip it, it's going to show the top side the way that you want it to. For this fabric though, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to pin it in place, or excuse me, clip it. I'm just going to clip it because that's how I'm doing it, making sure I line up all the layers. Now when I get to this end where my zipper is, after I've clipped a few of these in place, I'm going to open it and I'm going to move my zipper. And then I'm going to close it back up and reline it and make sure I clip that in place. And then now I'm going to do the same thing as the other side. I'm going to do with my zipper foot, I'm going to do a top stitch all the way down. When I get to here, I'm going to need to close my zipper, and then I can finish it off at the end, making sure to back stitch on both sides. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so I went ahead and attached my other side. I did the same thing as I did the other pieces. I pulled it away from the zipper, I gave it a press, and I did my top stitching about 1/8 inch away from my zipper. So now both sides are done. And now just make sure, I always like to test my zipper, make sure it opens and closes properly. And then now we're going to move on to step 10, completing your phone pouch. So what I do is I take both of my main pieces, I actually open my zipper, I take my main pieces and I place them together, right sides facing, and I do the same thing for the lining. And you can pin or clip in place all the way around. I usually like to take my ends and clip them just so they stay nice and neat when I'm sewing them down. And then you're going to actually sew using the 1/4 inch all the way around, making sure to leave a 4-inch gap on the end of the lining. That way we can turn our bag over when we're done. So go ahead and do your sewing all the way around, leaving the gap, and actually trim your edges just a tiny bit, making sure not to cut the seams when you're done, and go ahead and trim off the excess pieces from your D-rings. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll be right back. Okay, now I've done my sewing all the way around. I've left my gap for opening, and I went ahead and trimmed the edges just slightly, making sure not to cut any of the seams. Now I'm going to go ahead and take that lining, and I'm going to kind of poke the corners in a bit, just so that when I turn it right side out, it's a little easier to get those corners poked out. Again, I'm going to poke out all my corners. Feel free to use, I actually have a corner poker, but it has damaged fabric in the past, so be mindful of that. If you are using something to poke out the corners, just be mindful, because it gets, it can, like on this side where it's a little bit thinner, it can poke a hole into your fabric, so you want to be careful of that. Go ahead and push out the zipper ends, zipper tabs. I'm going to do that for both sides. Making sure everything looks okay. Looks pretty good. Okay, and then now you will have the lining that you just need to close up. So I actually press it just to give it a nice clean line, and then I'm going to sew my top stitch to close it about 1/8 inch. Okay, so I finished that last step, but I wanted to show you guys that I did end up pressing, I sewed it, I pressed my lining on the inside and gave it a nice press, and then now we're going to be attaching the cam snaps. I went ahead and attached this part. I'm going to talk you through it. I went ahead and measured your total piece, so lay this long ways. Your total piece should be around 4 inches. So I measure all the way at this edge, away from the zipper, and I go in 2 inches from the bottom up. And that's where I marked my spot. And I went down about 1/4 inch And that's where I placed this snap. Now for the other piece, I went ahead and measured, how much is that? I would say it's a little less than 1/2 inch down. And really you want to kind of get it slightly away from the thickest part of the fabric so that it really does snap in place easier. I'm going to go ahead and use my little tool that I have to try to make that hole just a little bit bigger because it's not really wanting to poke through. So with this being your side that's going to be on the outside, you want to make sure that the snap, the outside snap, is going to be placed with that piece on the outside. And I really want to push that fabric down in there. And then you're going to take your male piece, place it on top, and we're going to take our snap tool and we're just going to give it some really good presses. Just put that over there. I kind of like to turn it all the way around and give it some presses all the way around. That's just how I like to do it. Okay, so now I've got my snap on this end and I've got my snap on this end, and now you're able to snap it in place. And it should be a little taut, which is good because when you have your phone in there, you want to make sure that it's secure, it's not moving around too much, and it has space. And at this point would be a great place to test to make sure your phone does fit. I know mine does. Mine is a smaller iPhone. I don't have one of the nice new Plus ones, but my kids do, and theirs fits perfectly. So I'm going to go ahead and keep that just like that. Make sure your snap works. And now we are done with our main piece. So now we can move on to making the wristlet, which is step 12. And I'm going to go ahead and start that process in just a minute. Okay, first steps to making your wristlet. This is going to be my wristlet strap piece that I previously cut with the wrong side facing up. I'm going to use the same method that I did for a lot of the other pieces, like the binding and stuff. So I'm going to fold in half, press it, using that center line, fold both ends in, you will press, and then you're going to completely fold it in half. And I actually sew a top stitch along the edge here and on the other edge, 1/8 inch. So you'll have the 2 lines on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I will be right back. Okay, so I went ahead and did my top stitching for both the ends using 1/8 inch, and now I'm ready to attach my swivel lobster clasp. Now this is, I believe, the 1 inch one that I use. I like one a little bit bigger. It's easier to manage. So I'm going to take my piece and I'm going to thread it through, making sure that the top part that I want to be visible is on top with the lobster clasp. And then I'm going to take this and fold it together, facing right sides together, and it will be sandwiched with your lobster clasp. And I'm going to sew that edge, those 2 edges in place. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll be back. Okay, so now that you've got your end sewed, I'm going to place, here, let me just take it out. So now you have your end. I'm going to go ahead and put the end of the lobster clasp in between the two ends, if I can get it in there. Kind of sandwich it in between those little raw edges. And then I'm going to fold it over. And that way it gives it more of a neat look. And then you can do your top stitching to keep everything in place. So top stitch as close to lobster clasp as you can get. I kind of do a couple little stitches back and forth, and that will be the completion of your wristlet. Also, a fun little thing that you can do is if you have any rivets, you can add a rivet here, and that will keep it all in place. I like using my rivets, it's just a lot easier, but for pattern purposes, I do say to do the sewing, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So now we can move on to the next step after we've completed our wristlet, to the crossbody. I'll be back with you in a minute for that. Okay, so now we are back, and we are going to be on step 13, making your crossbody. So I went ahead and I have my long pieces that I've cut already. I actually cut mine just a teeny bit shorter because I'm a shorter person, so I don't need it that long. Anyways, you're going to take both of your pieces and face it with right sides fabric facing. You're going to line up two edges together and you're going to sew them in place using, I believe it's a 1/4 inch. So you'll go ahead and sew those together. I'm going to do that and then I'll be right back. Okay, so I just sewed my two pieces together and I opened the fabric and I went ahead and pressed the seams open, and that way it gives it a nice clean look. Now we're going to do this method is the same as the other methods, like the binding, except for, let me just see, yeah, this one's the same actually. So what we're going to do is same thing, press, when you go to your iron, you're going to just press everything in half, and using that center line, you're then going to pull the ends in to that center line, going all the way down the whole strap, and then again going down the whole strap. You're going to do this for the whole thing, and then when you've completely pressed everything as it should be, you'll do your top stitching on both ends using the 1/8 inch. Now I'm going to go do that. It takes me just a little bit of time, so I'm going to go complete this and then I'll be right back. Okay, so now we're ready to put our buckle on, which I actually was testing it, so let's do that together. So you're going to take your buckle piece and the piece you just prepared for your crossbody strap, and you're going to loop it through. Just like that. Pull it down, and then I actually pull some of this extra out for looping the other end. Okay, now with that same end, we're going to take our lobster clasp and loop it, and then we're going to turn it over and we're going to loop this end through here and then back through the other side, just like so. It's a little tricky, but you'll get it. And then after we've done that, we take the end now and we're going to sew it to this side of the fabric. Can you see that? So we've looped it through the buckle. Now we're going to attach it to this end. And just move your fabric out of the way and go ahead and sew a line across there, attaching it. I'll just pin mine in place so that you can see that when you do sew it, I like to test mine first, that your buckle will be able to move in and out, and mine does. So it will be able to move. But I'm going to move mine out a little more so that I have more room for sewing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and sew my line right here, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so I went ahead and I sewed it, and now you've got this side, you've got your lobster clasp attached with your buckle, and you can move it freely, as you can see. But now we have to attach the other end, making sure not to twist it. We have to attach the lobster clasp to the other end. So now we take our raw end, our lobster clasp here, and what I like to do is I pull a little extra, I tuck it down, and then I tuck it over. And that way your raw end is sticking on the inside and it's not visible when you sew it down. And then I'm going to sew it pretty close to the lobster end. So I'm going to go and do my top stitch there, and then I'll show you the full strap. Okay, so as you can see, I've got my piece that I sewed, and now both ends are attached just like so. And now I can actually take my pocket piece and attach both my ends. And now I've got a full crossbody strap. And just adjust it as you need for the length that works for you. And that's your whole pouch. And then you can actually take these off. And if you'd like to just use your wristlet, which is one of my favorite things to do, then you just have your wristlet attached and you're ready to go with your pouch. Put your phone in there. You've got the pouch for credit cards, money, lipstick, chapstick, anything else you want to take with you. Just the essentials is perfect. And everything's ready to go, and you've made your pouch. So that's the end of this video. I hope it was helpful, and I hope that you love this pattern, and I'd love for you guys to tag me when you've completed your cell phone 2-for-1 pouch. All right, thanks so much, guys. Bye-bye.